Hi everyone, it's Lauren. I hope you're all doing really well. Today I'm going to talk about the books that I intend on reading or getting read by the end of the year. My goal on Goodreads this year was to read 100 books, which it has been for the last couple of years, and so far I've read 50. So, 50 books in the next 3 months. I think that's something like 2 books a day. Probably not going to happen. I do remain optimistic though. I'll probably read a few more books. I'm kind of in that zone at the moment of reading books quite quickly. So, I don't know how restrictive I want this TBR to be. I don't normally do them monthly. I normally do them sort of quarterly. And I've also been doing a bit of a mission, project, which was to try and read through all of the books that I have on my shelves, or that, like collections of books, like all of my Persephone books, for example, which has kind of worked and kind of not, because it's meant I've had this pile of books that I've not necessarily been in the mood to read and then haven't read them. So I have quite a few books that I had on my TBR video last time, 3 months ago, which I haven't actually read yet. So I'm deciding what to do about them and whether I should still try and read them in the next 3 months, because there's 5 of them. The first one is The Years by Virginia Woolf, which has been on my TBR for like nearly a year now. Ha ha ha, The Years. And I just haven't read it. So I think I'm going to retire this one and put it back on my shelf, because I'm not reading it and it's just mocking me by it being there in my pile. The next one is Young Anne by Dorothy Whipple, which I do really want to read, so I'm going to keep that on my TBR this time. Something else I'm also going to keep is The Stolen Bicycle by Wu Ming Yi. I also have that House of Uyoya by Emilia Pardo Bazin, which was part of this Pocket Penguins collection, which is like classic literature from all over Europe. And I haven't read any of them. Not one of these books have I read. And this is the smallest one, and I still haven't read it. I need to work out what I'm going to do with these books. Am I actually going to read them, or are they just going to be pretty things on my shelf? Because I do want to read them, like in theory, but obviously not enough that I'm picking it up very quickly. So I might retire this one as well, and like maybe reset at the beginning of next year and decide what I want to do. And the last one is Brooklyn by Colm Tóibín, which is, not very long, and I do still want to read that. For some reason, maybe it's just because of this cover, I feel like this is more of a summary book though. Let me know if that's correct, if you've read it. I just feel like maybe this isn't the kind of book I want to read right now, but I do want to read it. So I might, actually, in the spirit of reading more, because you read more when the books you're going to read are things that you fancy and you're enjoying, I might take this off the TBR for now as well. So just keep these 2. As rollovers from last quarter. I'm talking about quarters, it makes it sound very businesslike. And then I've got some other books which I just am in the mood to read, some new books. I think I might kind of stop my project of trying to read 3 sets of books. I'm still going to try and finish my Persephones, but I just think, I don't know, being too restrictive on what I've got to read just puts me off. The first 2 are a couple of new books which we got at a Penguin kind of launch party that they had a few weeks ago, talking about some of the new releases that they had coming up. The first of which is The Witch Elm by Tana French, and all of these are kind of darker, spookier, maybe a little bit of kind of death and murder in all of these books. I'm just kind of in the mood for that at the moment. I think it's because it's getting closer to kind of October and November, and I'm just in the mood for like a thriller. And this is about a little boy who has some kind of trauma. I think it's to go and live with his grandparents, or he goes to his family's ancestral home. Actually, I'm assuming he's a little boy because it says Toby. He actually might be a man. I think I've assumed it's like a child. But anyway, once he gets to this house, there's the witch elm tree in the garden, and he finds a skull underneath it. So obviously then the police get involved and they're working out what happened. So this sounds like quite an engrossing mystery kind of novel, and I don't read a lot of stuff like this very often. So it's interesting that I felt quite drawn to it when they're explaining it at the event. Another one, which is coming out in January, but also sounded like sort of more up my street perhaps, but still a thriller, is Keeper by Jessica Moore. And this is the story of a woman who works in a women's refuge and is found dead, assumed a suicide by the police, but all of the women that she's been working with in the refuge don't think that that's the case. They think it's a murder. And I think you get the story of this kind of woman's life through all the perspectives of the different women that she's helped. So let's be honest, the reason this appeals to me isn't just because it's a thriller, but something about women, give it to me. It says on the front, he loves you, he controls you, he'll never let you go. So it's obviously looking, well, I say obviously, it seems like to me that it's looking at kind of abusive, controlling relationships as well. And this is a first novel, but it is inspired by work that Jessica Moore did with women who are like suffering from abusive relationships. So it sounds interesting, but also sort of horrible, obviously, to read, but I'm looking forward to that one. And then something which I do want to read, but also I'm like, do I want to read it? Or have I just been brainwashed to think I want to read it? And that's The Testaments by Margaret Atwood. And I mean, it's just been everywhere. I've not been able to get out of the hype for this book. It's also a very massive book, and I'm a bit like, oh, do I really want to read a book that's this huge? It doesn't fit in my bag. But, you know, this is the sequel to The Handmaid's Tale, if you've been living under a rock and don't know what this book is about. And I think it takes place something like 30 years later, or quite a lot of time after The Handmaid's Tale, so it's not directly linking up with what's happening in the TV show. I did like The Handmaid's Tale when I first read it ages ago, and I feel like the TV series I kind of liked, but then I just found too much, and I haven't watched it since about halfway through series 1. But this has also obviously been shortlisted for the Man Booker Prize. Everyone is very, very excited to read this. I like Margaret Atwood's writing, so I probably will read it. But I do sort of feel like the hype around both The Handmaid's Tale and The Testaments, it's like this is a new Bible and it will save us from the situation we're in now. And it's almost like religious, like the fervour around this book, to a point, I don't know if anyone else has felt this, but I've almost felt like, well, I don't want to read it, leave me alone. Like, it's just too much hype. And I just find it hard to believe that a single book can be that amazing. So maybe I'm just being a bit cynical, but I will read it and see what I think after I've actually read it, which makes more sense. Then for the Feminist Orchestra pick that we have for November and December is Virgin Envy, which is a list of essays on like the concept of virginity. And I've been wanting to read this all year, and I can't believe we've left it till right at the end of the year. I know we haven't done any videos on like any of the books this year, which is very, very naughty of us. And I'm very sorry, but I hope you have been reading along. We've also got the Goodreads group, which I will link in the description box below if you'd like to join in on the discussions. But this, I mean, it's just different essays by different people on the concept of virginity and just its status in our society and the kind of cultural significance or insignificance of it, it says here. But as it's essays written by lots of different people, I'm sure there'll be lots of different opinions. And I'm just really interested in this book, to be honest. And then another, I don't know if this is a book of essays as such, because it's all written by Sadie Doyle, but another book that I'm definitely going to be picking up is Dead Blondes and Bad Mothers. And it says Monstrosity, Patriarchy and the Fear of Female Power. Now, Sadie Doyle wrote Trainwreck, which we read last year for the Feminist Orchestra, which was all about the concept of a woman kind of going off the rails and becoming a train wreck. And this one, I feel like, I'm not really sure what kind of like the link of this is, Dead Blondes and Bad Mothers, but I feel like she's very good at looking at the representation of women kind of in culture, and the idea of a woman or femininity as a kind of a monster within the patriarchy. So it sounds like quite a vague topic actually, and one that I feel like I will understand more what she's trying to say after reading it. But I just enjoyed Trainwreck so much that I just think, yeah, fine. What else do you got to say, Sadie? Put it in my brain. And finally, even though I said I wasn't going to go around picking books from my collections, I actually do want to finish all of the Europa editions that I have. And the last book from the Europa editions that I own is Hollow Heart by Viola de Grado. And I do enjoy these editions, so considering there's one left, I feel like that's fine. Let me read this. And this is about a woman who commits suicide. It sounds quite abstract as a book, and when you read the blurb, it says she gives voice to an astonishing vision of life after life, betraying the awful longing and sense of loss that plague the dead. So yeah, again, this kind of fits into my sort of dark thriller, death, mysterious bent that I'm obviously going on with my reading in the next couple of months. But yeah, I quite fancy something lyrical, and it's not very long, so I don't mind adding it to my pile. So that's kind of a shorter TBR list than I normally have. I think that's 8 books that I've committed, as if as if I'm going to read all these. I mean, fingers crossed. But that's what I've put down between now and December. So hopefully I can get through it. I think it's a bit silly giving myself massive targets of reading 100 books in a year and reading 20 books a month or something stupid, and then I don't get it done, which is just silly. But I am nothing if not ambitious and optimistic, obviously. So I would love to hear from you if you've read any of these. Granted, some of them are quite new, but yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you thought of them, and if there's any you particularly recommend. And I'll see you in my next video. Bye!